If this video showed up for you, it's because this story is gonna move you and give you chills. So go ahead and subscribe to the channel if you like this kind of story and comment which city you're watching from. The mid-July heat in the small, dust-covered town of Oak Haven was enough to make the air shimmer above the asphalt, but 7-year-old Emma didn't seem to mind. She was a solitary child, the kind who found more comfort in the rustling of wind through the cornfields than in the noisy games of her classmates. On this particular Tuesday, the scorching sun wasn't the only thing bearing down on the rural landscape. There was a heavy silence, the kind that usually precedes a storm. Emma was taking her usual shortcut home, a path that skirted the edge of the old Miller property, a place most locals avoided. The fences were rotted, and the air always smelled of damp wood and neglect. But today, a sound broke the stillness, a low, pained whimper that seemed to vibrate through the dry grass. Emma stopped, her small sneakers crunching in the gravel, and tilted her head. She had no idea that following that sound would lead her to a destiny written in the stars. She crept closer to the dilapidated barn, her heart thumping a jagged rhythm against her ribs. There, tied to a rusted tractor axle by a chain heavy enough to anchor a boat, lay a German shepherd. But he didn't look like the proud dog she saw on TV. He was a shadow of an animal, his fur matted with mud and burrs, his ribs pressing against his skin like the rungs of a broken ladder. He lay in the dirt, panting shallow breaths, his water bowl dry and overturned. The smell of decay and hopelessness was overwhelming, making Emma wrinkle her nose, but her feet kept moving forward. The dog lifted his head, his ears flattening, not in aggression, but in pure, terrified submission. In his amber eyes, Emma didn't see a beast. She saw a plea for help that was louder than any scream. She took a step closer, unaware that this broken creature was about to change the definition of courage for everyone in town. "Hey there, boy," Emma whispered, extending a trembling hand. The dog flinched, expecting a blow, and the sound of the heavy chain dragging against the metal axle echoed like a gunshot in the quiet afternoon. Suddenly, the screen door of the farmhouse slammed open. "Get away from there, kid!" a voice boomed. It was Mr. Miller, a man whose face was as weathered and hard as the land he refused to tend. He stomped down the porch steps, wiping grease onto a stained rag. Emma froze, but she didn't run. She looked from the angry man to the trembling dog, and a strange, fierce resolve ignited in her chest. "He's thirsty," Emma said, her voice small but steady. "He's useless," Miller spat, kicking at the dirt near the dog's head. The dog didn't even flinch anymore. He just closed his eyes. "Doesn't bark, doesn't guard, doesn't hunt, just eats money I don't have. I'm taking him out back tomorrow to finish it." The words hung in the air, cold and final. Emma felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. She reached into her pocket, her fingers brushing against the cold metal of the coins she had been saving for 3 months to buy a new bicycle. She pulled out a crumpled $5 bill and a handful of quarters, her entire life savings. "I'll buy him," she blurted. Miller paused, squinting at the small girl and the pathetic pile of money in her hand. He looked at the dog, then back at the cash. A cruel smirk twisted his lips. $5 for a half-dead mutt? You're getting ripped off, kid, but he's your problem now." He snatched the money from her hand and unhooked the chain. The metal clattered to the ground, a sound of liberation that rang out like a church bell. The dog didn't move at first, unable to comprehend that the weight was gone. Emma knelt in the dust, ignoring the grime, and wrapped her small arms around the dog's neck. "I'm going to call you Rocky, because you're going to be strong as a rock." But as she tried to help him stand, his legs wobbled violently, and he collapsed back into the dust. Emma realized with a sinking heart that saving him wasn't going to be as simple as buying his freedom. It took Emma nearly an hour to coax Rocky the half-mile to her home. Every few steps he would stop, panting, his eyes scanning the horizon as if waiting for a punishment that never came. When they finally reached the porch of her grandfather's house, Grandpa Bill was sitting in his rocking chair, whittling a piece of cedar. Bill was a man of few words, a Vietnam veteran who carried his own scars in silence. He looked up, his eyes narrowing as they landed on the emaciated animal shivering despite the heat. "What in the world have you dragged home, honey?" Bill asked, his voice gruff. "His name is Rocky, Grandpa, and I saved him." Bill stood up, his bad knee popping, and walked slowly down the steps. He approached the dog with a caution born of experience. Rocky, who had been cowering, suddenly got stiff. He didn't growl, but he tracked Bill's movement with an intensity that was sharply different from his previous fear. Bill stopped 3 feet away, watching the dog's ears swivel like radar dishes. "He's in bad shape, honey," Bill said softly, noting the scars hidden beneath the matted fur. "Don't get your hopes up. Sometimes things are too broken to be fixed." "Not him," Emma insisted, soaking a rag to wipe the mud from Rocky's face. "He just needs to know he's safe." But as the sun began to set, casting long orange shadows across the porch, Rocky didn't sleep. He sat awkwardly by the door, facing outward, his eyes fixed on the tree line. He wasn't resting. He was waiting. And neither Emma nor Bill knew that the darkness falling over the farm was hiding something far more dangerous than a lonely night. Over the next few weeks, the transformation on the farm was nothing short of miraculous. With regular meals and Emma's relentless affection, Rocky's ribs began to disappear beneath a coat of fur that turned from dusty gray to a rich, burnished black and tan. The open sores healed into pale scars, hidden maps of a painful past. Emma spent every waking moment with him, reading storybooks aloud as he lay at her feet, his heavy head resting on his paws. Yet despite his physical recovery, there was a part of Rocky that remained locked away. He didn't chase balls, he didn't bark at the mailman, and he never, ever played. He simply existed in a state of hypervigilance, his amber eyes tracking every bird that flew overhead and every leaf that skittered across the porch. He wasn't acting like a dog who had found a home. He was acting like a soldier stationed at a new post. Grandpa Bill watched this dynamic with growing fascination and a nagging sense of familiarity. One humid afternoon, while fixing a fence post, Bill began to whistle an old marching cadence from his boot camp days, a tune etched into his memory. Left, right, left, right. Suddenly, the rhythmic scratching of Rocky's claws against the pavement stopped. Bill turned around. Rocky wasn't lying down anymore. He was standing at a perfect attention, his chest out, his ears pricked forward, staring intently at Bill. It wasn't the look of a pet begging for a treat. It was the focused, intense stare of a subordinate waiting for a command. Bill felt a shiver run down his spine that had nothing to do with the wind. He stopped whistling, and the dog relaxed instantly, though his gaze remained sharp. "Emma?" Bill called out, his voice low. "Come here a minute." Emma ran over, oblivious to the tension. "What is it, Grandpa?" "Watch this," Bill murmured. He stood straight and raised his right hand in a sharp, silent gesture, a tactical halt signal he hadn't used in 40 years. Before Emma could blink, Rocky dropped to the ground in a perfect sphinx position, his body tense as a coiled spring, scanning the perimeter. He didn't look at Bill. He looked at the tree line, covering their flank. "He's not just a stray, honey," Bill said, his voice thick with a mix of awe and sorrow. "He's been trained, and not for fetching slippers." But neither of them could guess just how vital that training was about to become. The revelation brought a new layer of mystery to the farm. Who had thrown away such a disciplined animal? And why was he terrified of loud noises but perfectly calm when given a silent command? The answers would come, but they would arrive wrapped in violence. It happened on a Tuesday evening, the kind where the air is thick with humidity and the cicadas are screaming in the trees. Emma had wandered down to the creek at the edge of the property, searching for smooth stones for a collection. Rocky, as always, was shadowing her, moving silently through the tall grass like a ghost. Emma was kneeling by the water, laughing as a frog splashed away when the birds suddenly stopped singing. The silence was instant and heavy, pressing down on the clearing like a physical weight. Rocky froze.
The fur along his spine stood up in a rigid ridge, and a low, guttural vibration started deep in his chest, a sound Emma had never heard before. She stood up, clutching a wet stone, her heart suddenly hammering in her throat. "Rocky!" she whispered. From the dense brush on the other side of the creek, a massive shape emerged. It was a wild boar, easily 300 pounds of muscle and bristle, its tusks gleaming like jagged knives in the fading light. These animals were invasive, aggressive, and known to kill without provocation. The beast locked its beady eyes on Emma, pawing the mud, a snort of hot air blasting from its nostrils. Emma was too terrified to scream. Her legs felt like they had turned to water. The boar lowered its head, preparing to charge, a living battering ram capable of shattering bone. But it had no idea what was standing between it and the girl. "Run, Emma!" Bill's voice screamed from the hill, too far away to help. The boar lunged, crossing the shallow water in a spray of mud and foam, but before it could reach the girl, a black and tan blur intercepted it with the force of a missile. Rocky didn't bark. He didn't hesitate. He launched himself into the air, colliding with the massive beast mid-charge. The sound of bodies crashing together was sickeningly loud. Rocky latched onto the boar's thick neck, using his own body weight to drag the monster away from Emma. The boar thrashed violently, tossing Rocky aside like a rag doll. The dog hit a tree trunk with a heavy thud and yelped, a sharp, high-pitched cry that tore through Emma's heart. But he didn't stay down. Blood was already matting the fur on his shoulder, but Bravo 9, the soldier inside the dog, had taken over. He scrambled back to his feet, placing himself directly between the sobbing girl and the enraged beast, baring teeth that were no longer the tools of a pet, but the weapons of a warrior. He held his ground, a wall of fury and loyalty, daring the monster to take one more step.
Grandpa Bill reached the creek bank just as the boar, intimidated by the feral intensity of the dog and the shouting man, turned and crashed back into the underbrush. But the victory was silent. Rocky stood swaying for a moment, his chest heaving, blood dark and slick against his tan fur before his legs gave out. He collapsed into the mud, not with a whimper, but with a heavy, exhausting sigh. Emma screamed, dropping to her knees, her hands instantly covered in the warm, metallic stickiness of his blood. "Get the truck, Emma! Run!" Bill roared, scooping the heavy animal into his arms as if he weighed nothing. The drive to Dr. Smith's veterinary clinic was a blur of tearing tires and Emma's muffled prayers in the passenger seat. Rocky lay in the back, his breathing shallow and ragged, his eyes fixed on Emma through the rear window, blinking slowly. He was fading, but he refused to break eye contact, as if his job wasn't done until he knew she was safe within the white walls of the clinic. When they burst through the doors, Dr. Smith took one look at the carnage and shouted for a gurney. The doors swung shut, separating the girl from her savior, leaving her in a waiting room that smelled of antiseptic and fear. Hours felt like days. The clock on the wall ticked with a mocking slowness. Finally, Dr. Smith emerged, pulling off his surgical mask. He looked tired, but there was a strange light in his eyes, a mix of confusion and reverence. "He lost a lot of blood, and he has deep lacerations, but he's gonna make it," the doctor said. Emma collapsed into her grandfather's side, sobbing with relief. "But," Dr. Smith continued, holding up a small scanner, "there's something else. When we prepped him for surgery, we scanned for a microchip. We found one, but it's not a standard domestic chip." He turned the scanner's screen toward them. It didn't display an owner's address. It displayed a serial number and a rank. "This dog isn't Rocky," Dr. Smith said softly. "According to the database, this is Bravo 9. He was a specialized explosives detection dog with the Marines. His handler was killed in action overseas 2 years ago, and in the chaos of the withdrawal, Bravo 9 was listed as presumed dead. Somehow, he ended up smuggled back, lost and sold off to the wrong people." The silence in the room was deafening. The useless dog Miller had kicked, the animal that cowered at loud noises, was a war hero who had likely saved hundreds of lives before he was discarded like trash. His fear wasn't cowardice, it was trauma, and his defense of Emma wasn't just instinct, It was a soldier protecting his new squad. The story of Bravo 9, the hero who traded the battlefield for a farmhouse, spread through Oak Haven like wildfire. By the time Rocky was discharged a week later, the clinic's parking lot was full, not just with neighbors, but with veterans from 3 counties over, standing in formation, saluting as the limping dog was led out to Bill's truck. The local news crew was there, cameras rolling, capturing the moment the useless dog walked with his head held high, leaning against the small girl who had seen his worth when no one else did. A reporter knelt down, microphone in hand, addressing Emma. "You must feel very lucky, Emma. You bought a military hero for just $5. That's quite a deal for a dog that saved your life." Emma looked down at Rocky, who was currently licking her hand, his tail wagging with a gentle, steady rhythm. She looked into the camera, her eyes clear and old for her age. "I didn't buy him to save me. Mr. Miller said he was worth nothing. I gave $5 because that was all I had. But I think—" She paused, stroking the velvety fur between Rocky's ears. "I think he was the one who rescued me first. I just held the leash." Rocky is now retired from war, but he has a new mission: walking Emma to the bus stop every single morning. He still doesn't like fireworks, and he still scans the perimeter when the wind changes, but he knows he's finally home. Sometimes, the things the world throws away are the very things we need the most. We pass by miracles every day, disguised as broken things. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who needs to believe in second chances. And don't forget to hug your dog a little tighter tonight. They might just be the hero of your story, waiting for their moment.